morning, everyone. Today's Thursday, and we're going to carry on with our walk through Mark. My name's Julian. I'll be leading you today. And our passage for today is Mark 10, 32 to 34. Three little verses, and I'll be going to start with reading it through from the NIV. And I've got a few thoughts and a couple of things to draw us to a close at the end. So here we go. They were on their way up to Jerusalem, with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. "We are going up to Jerusalem," he said, "and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise." That's a chirpy one for this morning, isn't it? So, thinking back, Jesus started talking about his death back in what we'd refer to as chapter 8. And speaking about his crucifixion, he said that he must suffer and that he'll be rejected by the scribes and the religious leaders. And then after he rebukes Peter, Jesus calls the crowd to him and makes the following points to his followers. This is again back in chapter 8. "You must deny yourself and take up your cross. If you lose your life for the gospel, you'll save it. What good is it to save the whole world and forfeit your soul? And do not be ashamed of me." And then last Friday, thinking a bit further forwards, Mike led us through a very sobering passage, thinking about how we won't enter heaven if we've got sin in our lives. And it's a sobering matter. And what are we going to do about it? And we've looked a little bit about hardness of heart and the impact that has on marriage and divorce, and then the disciples not quite understanding the whole thing with the children, as Mark spoke about, and then Al reinforced yesterday, and then the rich young man who observed the law but would not leave everything to follow Jesus. So you see, we've kind of had a bit of a following on in line with some of these predictions from his Jesus when Jesus was first talking about his death. So Jesus has presented his future death, and then we've had some stories which have sort of not been dissimilar, but kind of along the same line, just helping to reinforce some of the points. So we get to today, and Jesus is walking up towards Jerusalem, knowing full well what's going to happen. There would have been people going to Passover, but clearly he's made quite an impact because the disciples were astonished. So if there were any of the disciples that fully understood what was coming, it's not surprising they were astonished. Here's a man that's talked about his own death going to happen in Jerusalem. It's going to be pretty horrible, and that just about everyone's going to turn on him, but he still goes up to Jerusalem. So having told us about taking up our own cross, Jesus is quite literally walking to Jerusalem to take up his own cross. And those that were following were afraid. Now again, it's Passover time, people were going to Jerusalem. So were these people going up to Passover and just thinking, what's going on? Or were they anticipating a sort of political rebellion, a messianic overthrow of the Romans, possibly something similar to the Maccabean revolt from 150 years before? And they could have been wondering, is this the man that's fed over 9,000? Is this the man that's healed people from all over our country? What's going on here? And they could also be afraid because they could be guilty by association, and the Romans could be pretty ruthless. And if you arrived at the same time as this Nazarene, you might be put to death as well. So Jesus takes his disciples aside and says, there will be betrayal. So to know that someone in your group is going to give you over to the authorities, but still carry on doing it anyway, that's what he's saying. And then he says he's going to be delivered twice, first of all to the religious leaders, and then handed over to the Gentiles, or the Romans. We've seen things like this prophesied before in some of the Old Testament. Isaiah 52 springs to mind. Then he says he's going to die pretty horribly, suffocating on a cross. And then he says he's going to be raised again. So someone else has encapsulated this rather well, and I'm going to use their words. Excuse me. So this is actually a commentary on Matthew, but he says, "The last will be first. He is the last in his condemnation, mockery, and death. And he will be first when God raises him from the dead and exalts him to the position of authority over the world. The teaching about rewards is exemplified in Jesus, and his disciples must follow him." So to put yourself in that position of being last, when you know that something horrible is going to happen, is pretty bold. And as followers of Jesus, and being last and looking out for other people, that's quite a challenge. And that, I think, is something for us to think about today. Thank you very much.